Content is intended to provide accurate information, however, is not intended as financial, tax, or legal advice. Please consult a financial, legal, or tax professional for specific information regarding your individual situation. Opinions expressed and provided are for general informational purposes only and should not be considered a solicitation for the purchase or sale of any security.
Welcome to Game Plan for Retirement with Chris Mcintire. Mcintire Retirement Services, Northwest Ohio's retirement planning resource.
And welcome into the program. This is your Game Plan for Retirement with Northwestern Ohio's resource for a common sense approach to planning. He is president and founder of Mcintire Retirement Services and our resource for a common sense approach to planning, making sure that we keep our financial, our investment, and our retirement future in focus. He is Chris Mcintire, president and founder of Mcintire Retirement Services. So glad to have you along, Chris, and providing the insight and guidance that you do.
Yeah, it's good to be here and good to be with everybody this weekend, Peter. Thank you.
Well, it is a great time to join with you, Chris, because there's so many questions. There's so much confusion. And I would say that we may not hear or see everything until we're sort of exposed to it, right? It's like sometimes we don't even know something exists until we do. And then all of a sudden it's all that we hear about, and we seem to see it and hear it everywhere we go. For some of us, that's the financial world. It's kind of something that we don't pay a whole lot of attention to until it's forefront and front and center in our minds. But Chris, you are in it every day. This is really where you spend your time and focus and what you enjoy paying attention to. So you may see and hear things that the average person may not be paying attention to. Would that be a fair statement?
Oh, it most definitely is. And sometimes it can be a challenge to convey that message in the right form with the right type of content that people really need to see. And I think we would all agree that, right now we probably live in a world of a lot of disinformation or misinformation purposely given to drive an opinion, obviously with the politics that we deal with today and the partisan divide. And, when it's kind of like finding a real journalist nowadays, they either lean right to the right or to the left. And, instead of shooting right down the middle and let you make your own decision. So I try to be skeptical of both and present the facts and, and how they, impact the individual client that I'm looking across the table at on a daily basis, all day, every day.
Well, Chris, we have several articles that we want to address and review and discuss today that we will evaluate for their validity and value and see what your take on these recent economic and financial articles and really the status of the economy and our planning means. And if you've got questions, ladies and gentlemen, you are always welcome to be in touch. If you would like to have a relationship with an advisor, putting your best interest at the forefront of all recommendations and planning efforts that are made, Chris Mcintire is that fiduciary advisor. Investment, retirement, and financial planning can be done there at Mcintire Retirement Services. Give them a call, 800-868-1194. That's 800-868-1194, 800-868-1194. To start, Chris, we've got this article from the Retirement Republic, and it is the 5 biggest challenges in retirement. It starts at number 1 with longevity being a challenge. What do you think about longevity being such a big issue that they put it as the number 1 challenge of retirement?
Well, Peter, I do a lot of my educational events and we highlight different types of risk. And the number 1 risk is longevity, because the longer, the longer you live, the chances of running out of money, which is what most people are going to think of. But also the longer that you have in front of you, more catastrophic events can happen. And I suppose we probably should say some very good events can certainly happen as well. But how do you counter the risk of outliving your money? How do you counter the risk of, high inflation for a decade versus deflation for a decade like Japan had been dealing with? So yeah, obviously, longevity is a risk multiplier almost, because more things can happen in a long longer time frame than can happen in a short time frame, if that makes sense.
So it sounds like, in your opinion, this is fact, this is valid, and we do need to address longevity through the planning process. Longevity can be addressed, but Tom Hegna has called this the risk multiplier. He's a well-known financial author. Again, one of those names that you may not know it until you do, but he has talked about the fact that longevity essentially increases the likelihood of all the other risks impacting and affecting you. And when we think of risk, we think of the market. That's actually falling to number 2 on this list. Volatility in the market, a challenge that must be faced in retirement.
Yeah, and obviously that's probably one of the big headlines of 2022 so far, is the bear market that we hit, and are we going to go into a recession? And it certainly is an emotional risk, right? Because nobody likes to open their statement and see loss after loss, month after month. And we've had a very, we'll just take the first half of 2022 as one of the worst performing, markets in the recent memory for many folks, that prolonged period of time. And we got a little reprieve in the month of July and August, carried some of that through, but then we started to sell off again here as time went on. So yes, market volatility, certainly number 2, because that's where most people have a significant part of their life savings, and stocks and bonds in 2022 both took a significant hit.
Challenge number 3 on this list, inflation. Chris, it sounds like this list is going down a pretty solid path in naming some of the biggest risks we're going to face. Inflation obviously has been the news of the year, maybe the past couple years, and certainly something more difficult for those in retirement to address than maybe active wage earners.
Yeah, no question about it, because those who are in retirement are living on fixed incomes, typically like Social Security. If they're fortunate enough to have a pension, many of those pensions will not have a cost of living adjustment. So if inflation is 8%, that your purchasing power is taking a significant hit. So, the Federal Reserve this year has really taken bold action, almost historic action, to try to tame inflation. And we would call that demand destruction. Okay. And you've heard that term on the some of the news programs, and it's not a negative. It's the reality. They have to shut down the demand for goods and services so the price increases don't outpace the inflation target that the Federal Reserve has set at around 2%. So, will they have the stomach to create enough demand destruction to get down to 2% fast? Or do they not have the political will to, inflict the type of demand destruction that we need to have, and inflation will be a higher rate for a much long period of time? I would bet on the latter, not the former.
Well, we can all Monday morning quarterback from our armchairs and criticize, but it's not a position that I envy either, Chris, having the responsibility of trying to walk that tightrope and figure out how to tame inflation as well as keep the economy floating and operable.
Yeah, no question about it. And Jerome Powell's got a difficult job. They probably let inflation get ahead of us, and now they're trying to play catch up. And 0.75% rate increases are tough to stomach for new home buyers, for people with credit card debt, for, just the overall inflation side of things, and, costs of goods and services. I mean, it's a big hit. We've gone through a long period of time with very minimal inflation in all reality. And now it's impacting everyone across all economic classes, no matter what you hear on the news. When home prices are skyrocketing and hotel costs are skyrocketing, airplane tickets are skyrocketing, that affects everybody.
Challenge number 4, Chris, taxation. Do you believe that this is a high level item that must be addressed in retirement planning?
Certainly, because it's a legislative risk as well. So kind of tie those two together, because we don't know 10 years from now who the powers are going to be in increase, I guess we'll call it that, as part of the anti-inflation bill, which is a joke in among itself anyway, just the title of it. But we'll move on from that. And taxation certainly can have an impact in your retirement because it's the same thing as inflation. Inflation is a stealth tax. It's the loss of value of your dollar. So if they raise income taxes, right, you have to take out more money out of your IRA to pay Uncle Sam to go buy the same goods and services. So certainly something that we can't control. All we can do is vote and, see who's running on keeping taxes at the status quo or lowering them or raising them. And I suppose we should say in 2026, the tax cuts that President Trump put into play, which took the 15% tax bracket to 12%, that was about a $1,500 tax savings for middle America. That will sunset, and tax rates are right now legislatively set to increase income tax rates in 2026, Peter.
So we've got to plan and prepare for that. Again, something that unless we are aware of it, unless we are in the weeds each and every day, paying attention to this stuff, we may not be aware that as current law stands, taxes are already slated to increase in just a few short years. But if we are dealing with a qualified, experienced professional, if we have a resource and a relationship with an advisor, we should be made aware of these so that we could plan strategically. And that's the benefit, that's the true value of this program, ladies and gentlemen, is that we bring to light these different aspects and try to inform and educate. But you have the resource of Chris Mcintire available to you on a personal, individual level. If you would like to have a conversation, if you'd like to ask a few questions, if you would like to address any of these retirement challenges that we have covered so far, pick up the phone, request the time and the opportunity to get your game plan for retirement, the proprietary plan that Chris Mcintire can help put together alongside and with you there at Mcintire Retirement Services. 800-868-1194. That's 800-868-1194. 800-868-1194. These are big challenges: longevity, market volatility, inflation, taxation. The good news, Chris, is that if we address those top four challenges, the likelihood is that we will dramatically increase the possibility that we leave a positive, impactful legacy for family and loved ones, which is challenge number 5. Leaving that legacy behind may not be all about the dollar amount, but we've got the financial legacy as well as the emotional and memory legacy.
Yeah, and this is something that usually is part of the retirement transition. So if somebody's listening to the show out there today and they have just retired, their biggest focus isn't on the legacy. It's on this transition they have into structuring income out of investments. When do they take their Social Security? They want to live now. They want to do some of their traveling while they're younger and healthier. As they approach typically into those, the later part of the 70s and the 80s, the focus then becomes on, okay, how do we transition some of this money into our legacy, if you will? Many people, the easiest way to do it is with a life insurance policy because it's guaranteed to pay out. It's tax-free. But many people, once they pay off their houses and things like that, they don't think they need life insurance anymore. And they think they prefer to play this gamble in the stock market and say, well, we want to leave this money to our kids, but we don't need any life insurance, which is essentially the most efficient wealth transfer vehicle ever created.
That's its specific purpose, right?
Yep. I'm going to take pennies and buy tax-free dollars into the future. That's it. It's that simple. But we'll digress. Maybe we'll do some shows on that in the future here, buddy. Yep.
Another article here, Chris, from Financial Advisor magazine cited a CNBC survey that found that 68% of those who retired during or since the pandemic would consider returning to work. However, it found that many had already started claiming and collecting Social Security, and it discussed the options to unretire. Now, what are your thoughts and feelings on unretiring and reversing a decision on Social Security?
Yeah, so in fact, we've had a couple of clients do exactly the same thing. They got a job offer that was almost too good to be true. Some of it is part-time work, but very well compensated. A lot of engineers do that. They can go back as a consultant. And I think I'll make a joke here. A lot of the husbands that retired, the wives have said, why don't you go back to work? And but you can certainly stop your Social Security payment and then enter the workforce once again. And the benefit to that is, if you're just going to work part-time, you're contributing to Social Security. So your benefit will go up in the future as well. But you can stop your Social Security payment and go back to work.
So it sounds like you would agree this is valid. This is actually a true phenomenon that there are those that retired, claimed and collected Social Security, but now are considering unretiring. The article lists a few caveats, a few rules and restrictions on unretiring or reversing the decision on Social Security. Chris, if we are in this boat and considering this as a possibility, what do we need to know about whether or not we can or cannot do so?
Yeah, well, you can if you want to, no question about it. And I think probably the correct definition term I should use, the correct term would be you would suspend your Social Security benefits if you went back into the workforce. If you are past your full retirement age, so for me, that's 67. If I went back to work at age 68, I do not have to stop my Social Security benefit. I can earn as much money as I want to without being penalized on it. If you're under your full retirement age, there's a certain amount of money that you can earn before you somewhat get penalized for Social Security and they start withholding some of your payments.
And then finally, the article cited with under 1 year of claiming and collecting, there's the possibility of actually doing a complete redo, kind of a mulligan on Social Security.
Yeah, correct. You can actually pay it back within the first 12 months, pay it back. You go back into the workforce and then contribute into Social Security and Medicare for, a year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever the term is. And then then you can refile for your benefit and they will recalculate what it is going to be. You're correct, Peter.
Well, again, several options there, ladies and gentlemen, and things that we may not know or be aware of or pay attention to until the situation applies to us. But that is the job of a qualified, experienced professional, to know the options, to be well-versed, and to help you plan and prepare, weigh the pros and cons of all decisions that we face. That's what Chris Mcintire does for his clients there at Mcintire Retirement Services. If you have questions or concerns, if you'd like to talk over your situation or get an in-depth review and analysis of your investments, your retirement accounts, and your plan for retirement, pick up the phone and give a call. 800-868-1194. That's 800-868-1194. 800-868-1194. A combination of a couple different articles here, Chris. One from Yahoo Finance, so take it for what you will, but it cited that millennials are actually deeply in debt. It said that over a third of millennials are more than $100,000 in debt, and mostly this is not home mortgage debt. This is consumer debt, vehicle debt, and student loan debt. And then another article from Reuters kind of echoed the same, but it broadened the spectrum out to all Americans as a result of overspending and inflation straining our finances. We are getting more and more in debt. Now, Chris, first, the validity of the article, and then maybe commentary about what this means for the economy.
Yeah, and it seems like with the millennial generation, they're either doing very good or, like you say, a lot of student loan debt and just can't get out from underneath student loan, credit card debts. I would certainly agree with that, but it almost seems like it's a case of the haves and the have-nots, if you will, with that generation. I've got nieces and nephews and whatnot that, seem to be doing very well. The student loan side of things is a political football right now, talk of canceling the debt and things like that. And I'm not going to touch that one on today's show.
Well, the Yahoo article did cite that most are still optimistic of their ability to pay off the debt. So at least there's that.
Yes. And, I think most the older Americans would say, look, it's your debt. You got to pay it back, not necessarily the taxpayers. Nobody paid for mine. Anyway. But they could certainly probably restructure some of the student loan debt. I mean, some of that stuff's at like 9% interest. And, it's like, come on, if you want them to go to college, you can't bankrupt them in the process, of course. So I think all of us have a little sympathy with, on that side of it. But, for a lot of them, there's good debt and bad debt. So obviously if they rung up the JCPenney card or whatever, that's bad debt and you need to get rid of that. Student loan debt, you need to manage that the best you can because, you might owe $50,000, but it got you into a job or a career where you're making $200,000 as well. So sometimes, that, you gotta get there to, fake it till you make it, so to speak. And then, home interest or home mortgages, I think most of us would agree, well, that's pretty good debt to have because you have, you create equity and whatnot in your home. We just had a niece, they sold their house and got $25,000 above the asking price and made a very good profit on their home to buy the next one, So, So that was good debt, obviously.
Fantastic. Plus, most people can't plop down the kind of money it takes to just purchase a home outright. So having a mortgage is just sort of part of our natural financial progress and evolution, but more Americans are in debt, according to Reuters, and that amount of debt is growing. So that is something, Chris, that you encourage people to try to limit, control, and eliminate when and where possible. And that's just through proper planning and making sure that we're a little financial discipline. But certainly the inflation, the market volatility has put some additional stress on us there. And for those younger Americans, again, back to picking on the millennials a little bit, Financial Advisor magazine circled back to maybe throw a little bit of extra insight on this. It said, where are Gen Zers and millennials turning to for their financial advice? Well, mostly from financial gurus on TikTok, apparently. May not be the best source for proactive and well thought through specific advice and guidance. The magazine article
and
stated.
I would think part of that is part of the, the new technology that, instead of sitting across the table from someone who can, kind of read the emotions and whatnot, they would prefer to deal with someone they don't know, they can't see. And just because there might be a label on it, well, our advice is free. Okay. That's just that type, that generation is very into that. And, I think most of us, a little bit older, we're used to dealing with people so we can see and read someone's facial expressions and, the things you get from an interpersonal relationship that you can't get from somebody wearing a headset that you have no idea who they are, where they are, and what their true background is. And, but it might be free.
Well, Gen Xers listed Warren Buffett as their number one source. For millennials, number two was Warren Buffett. Gen Zers actually placed Buffett near the bottom of the list. Instead, Dasha Kennedy, the broke girl, was number three. Delian Barrows, a social influencer, number two. And then one of the meme stock pickers, Mr. Yang, was number one, all TikTok or YouTube channels. Just interesting insight and commentary. Finally, I think for the time that we're going to have on the program today, Chris, a Kiplinger article that we wanted to review on outdated rules for retirement and your insight, commentary, and opinion on these rules, and then whether or not the article gets it right. Are these outdated rules? 3 dated rules of thumb retirees should think twice about. Number one rule of thumb, the traditional 60-40 portfolio allocation rule. What do you think?
Yes, and that portfolio has not worked out very well for 2022. Rising interest rates have led bond prices to their worst year, I think, since like 1978, something like that. Obviously, stock prices have gone down as well. So every once in a while, you get the perfect storm where everything can go down in value, a la 2018, when was the last time they raised interest rates and bond prices fell, stock prices fell, commodity prices fell. This year is a little different. Commodity prices have gone up. Commercial real estate has held up well as an inflation hedge. but certainly that 60-40, 60% stocks, 40% bonds, or even vice versa for a more conservative investor has not been a very rewarding year in performance for them. And that is the overwhelmingly majority of retirees want a 60-40 portfolio.
Circling back, a little bit of a shameless plug for those Gen Zers. By the way, folks, Chris Mcintire is out there on YouTube with his channel. You want to follow a financial guru who I think does have some fantastic insight. You can go there, watch all of the podcasts, all of the episodes. We talk about a lot of different specific financial topics. You can find the ones that apply to you and your situation, or that you are interested in answers to very easily there. We archive all of the podcasts on the website, McIntireRetirementServices.com. You'll find great observation, insight, and guidance, like reviewing this traditional 60-40 mix and investment allocation. Does it still work? Is it still effective? Is it still applicable in today's environment? Or if you've got specific questions and would like an individual review, you've got the ability to have that conversation and form that relationship with Chris Mcintire as your advisor. If you would like to begin the conversation, pick up the phone and give a call, 800-868-1194. Rule number 2, Chris, that the Kiplinger article says may be questionable in today's modern economic environment, the 4% rule. Can you explain the rule and then give us your take on it?
Yes, the 4% rule was created in 1994. The gentleman's name, was it Charlie Bengen, I think?
Bengen.
Out of California.
Bill
Bengen, I'm sorry. Yep, out of California. And again, it's a theory, and it was designed to say, okay, if you retired at age 65, you had $1 million, or whatever the dollar amount is, using million as an easy number, and withdrew 4% of that a year and adjusted that withdrawal for inflation every year, you should, quote unquote, should be okay through a 30-year retirement. So 4% withdrawal rate on whatever your nest egg is. And here's the problem with the 4% rule. In 1994, what was the interest rate environment compared to the interest rate environment of, say, 2009 until 2021, where we basically had very low interest paid on our savings and even bond yields were down significantly. So I think Morningstar did some research on that. Dr. Wade Pfau also did some. We had him on the show as well. And said, look, that no longer works right now in today's current economic climate. I think Morningstar said it was 2.8%, and in 2013, and then I think they even lowered that at another point in time.
Now, you believe, Chris, that maybe they were swinging the pendulum too far, that they probably were more conservative than necessary, even in a low interest rate and volatile market environment.
Well, I'll give Dr. Pfau some credit here, is that, he would utilize an annuity to help offset that 4% rule. And Mr. Bengen was just simply using a 60-40 portfolio, 60% stocks, 40% bonds, where Dr. Wade Pfau says, well, here's how you can protect against that, is use other instruments that are out there. And so, I think I answered your question on that one there.
You did. And I think I made that as a statement rather than as a question. I don't mean to put words in your mouth, but you certainly did answer and address the question of do we feel like we can actually generate a more generous cash flow? It sounds like yes, through proper planning, utilizing the proper instruments. Indeed, we do. Number 3 on Kiplinger's list of these rules to re-examine, 3 dated rules that retirees should think twice about: passive investing theory. Chris, it's maybe not an environment where the old buy and hold mentality works as effectively as it once did.
Yeah, and that's a good strategy when you're accumulating money. When you're younger, because you can ride through the peaks and troughs of the stock market. And, we've had to coach many people through that this year. When you get into retirement, you may want to shift from growth stocks to income stocks. You may want to go from high yield bonds to corporate bonds to U.S. government bonds, and so you want to be a little bit more, let's call it tactical and being able to shift into different segments of the economy. So we're going into recessionary world right now. So consumer staples and utility stocks have held up very well, those sectors, compared to discretionary type stocks, as an example, Peter.
Well, again, ladies and gentlemen, maybe you're into paying attention to these things and saw all of these articles, but Chris Mcintire, he's got his fingers on the pulse and has the ability to help you put this information into application. Offers education here on the program, but also the ability for you to formulate and implement and execute your plans with an independent fiduciary advisor, a local resource for you, ladies and gentlemen. Pick up the phone, give a call if you would like to sit down with Chris Mcintire and put your game plan for retirement together. 800-868-1194. That's 800-868-1194. 800-868-1194. Always the professional, always informed, and bringing that information to us here on Your Game Plan for Retirement. Chris, we appreciate your time and the insight and perspective today.
Hey, my pleasure to be with everybody. Have a great weekend out there and stay safe, folks.
Visit McIntyreRetirementServices.com for many additional valuable resources, including other great episodes of Game Plan for Retirement with Chris Mcintire. Be sure to subscribe.
The content of this radio show is provided for informational purposes only and is not a solicitation or recommendation of any investment strategy. You are encouraged to seek investment, tax, or legal advice from an independent professional advisor. Any investments and/or investment strategies mentioned involve risk, including the possible loss of principal. Advisory services offered through Brookstone Capital Management, a registered investment advisor.
Fiduciary duty extends solely to investment advisory advice and does not extend to other activities such as insurance or broker-dealer services. Advisory clients are charged a quarterly fee for assets under management, while insurance products pay a commission, which may result in a conflict of interest regarding compensation.
Any comments regarding safe and secure investments and guaranteed income streams refer only to fixed insurance products. They do not refer in any way to securities or investment advisory products. Indexed or fixed annuities are not designed for short-term investments and may be subject to caps, restrictions, fees, and surrender charges as described in the annuity contract.